Okay, I'm going to call the budget meeting to order. It's a little after 5, and we're going to be video conferencing with La Quinta, so hopefully they're tied in with us. So, Mr. Broking, we'll go ahead.
Yes, this presentation will be very similar to the one I made last week. For the folks in La Quinta, I'll go over the Energy Department budget first, and then we will cut off from them and then go on to the Water Department budget.
Do we have an audience in La Quinta?
I don't know the answer to that question. Marion, are you there?
I am. Can you please repeat the question? I didn't hear it.
Oh, Marion, do we have an audience in La Quinta?
Actually, right now it's just Governmental Affairs Manager Patrick Swarthow, Cindy Matajowski from Finance, and myself right now.
Okay, that's fine. We have an audience.
We have an audience, so I'll go.
Okay.
Operating budget for the Energy Department. This is O&M, not capital. We categorize it into three line items: fuel and purchase power, by far the largest; operations and maintenance; and debt service. You can see fuel and purchase power. We expect to go up 2013 budget compared to 2012 by about 5.5%. The O&M budget's going up about 4.3%. And the debt service is dropping about 14%. That's mainly going from leasing our equipment and vehicles to buying them. Overall, the total operating budget is going up 3% for the year, $435 million compared to $422. The capital budget drops considerably this year, primarily because we've completed El Centro Unit 3, the El Centro Unit 3 repowering project. As you can see, that drops from a budget of $82 million to about $7 million, or a 91% drop. Transmission also dropped, distribution dropped a little, only other shows an increase. Centralized services down. Overall, the capital budget is down 46%. When you compare 2013 to 2012. Slide shows a summary of the revenue and expenditures. The revenue line item does include a 1 cent base rate increase, which is about $33 million, including that along with all the other revenue from the department, including interest, $478 million, less all the operating expenses, including debt service, is $433 million, and then from that net number we back out money that we set aside for to protect the balancing authority that we put in the balancing authority reserve fund. That's about $16 million, and then we're using some of what we call the fund balance of public benefits that have been accumulated over the years and spending that on authorized projects this year. So all things at the end, you add and subtract up. We have cash available for capital of $41 million, plus $16 million for the Balancing Authority Reserve Fund. So about $58 million would be available, providing there is a 1 cent base rate increase. If there's not, then there would be roughly $33 million less. Pie chart breaks the expenses into main categories. The ECA power supply obviously is the largest, a little over 5 cents. What's in what we call the base power supply is a little over 2, and everything else is around the 1 or 2 cent range. O&M is almost 3 cents. Debt service a little over 1 cent. The net capital a little less than 1 cent, and centralized services is about a little over 1.5 cents. Total cost per kWh is 14 cents, and that number, to get to the average rate, we reduce that by our other revenue, or when I say other revenue, non-retail rate revenue, such as transmission and wholesale sales, and that's what drives the average system rate below that pie chart. And then as we did last week, I'm going to ask the Energy Department folks to come up and talk about staffing, their successes and challenges.
Board President, members of the board, thank you, Greg. Real quickly, as we mentioned before, and I wanted to elaborate a little bit on these numbers, and I hope I don't confuse in my explanation. If you noticed on the customer service side in 2012, there was 99, we show 99 employees. In 2013, we show 108. One of those positions is a position that we reclassified from customers operations. We had an opening there, and we didn't fill it in customer operations. We filled it in customer service. The other 8 positions are positions that were already existing, but to clarify and to make sure that we didn't run afoul in some of the HR technicalities, we reclassified our part-time employees that allow the call center to work 24/7. They went from part-time temporary employees to temporary IID employees. When we changed the designation, the finance now then counts them as employees even though they were already existing employees. Having said that, in actuality, if you were to take the fact that those 8 employees were already existing in 2012, the actual population or overall staff of the Energy Department in 2013 is actually less by at least that 8 number, by 8. Not to speak for Carl, he can eloquently do his own part, but also when you look at the fact that we also added 6 positions to in other areas, we actually added a total of 14 positions in the Energy Department staffing for 2013, yet the number didn't increase. In other words, we made room for them by eliminating other positions. So in essence, in reality, if you look at that, we actually have 8 positions less than we did in 2012 because of the fact that the 8 positions that work in the customer service were all actually already employed. And I just wanted to make that distinction that in reality, the Energy Department has a reduction of staff employees by a minimum of 8 people. I'm going to go ahead and go into successes. And if I may, again, I think we have achieved commercial operations of unit number 3, as with the guidance of the board and their backing and their foresight to be able to approve the project. Not only is the project coming under budget, but it also significantly improves the reliability of our overall system. And also, we've also hopefully will finally come to resolution the Nyland gas turbine plant chiller. We're in our final stages. We hope to have that resolved by the end of the first quarter of next year.
We still have the $5 million in the bank.
Well, a little more than that, $5.2 million. One of the other successes that we're also very proud of, we improved the transmission distribution system reliability with the foresight of the board to be allowing us to complete a number of projects in the distribution side that brought much needed reliability in the cities, whether they be Calexico, Brawley, up in La Quinta, and our old, of course, Alamarillo that has greatly improved the reliability there. We take great pride in number 3, and I think this goes to the efforts of everybody in the Energy Department, the ability to restore power in a very short period of time, whether it's an earthquake, large storm, or even an outage that's caused by the utilities. We think we're one of the better utilities that is able to react quickly. Our employees come to work, get the work done, and then ask questions how they're going to be compensated. We've also implemented our new IVR system in the phone center. It's greatly improved our ability to provide different options to people that call in. We're still working out the kinks, especially because now the customer that calls in has the ability to direct himself to the appropriate office without having to go and wait for CSR to answer the phone. And so we'll work with other departments in trying to finalize that area and work the kinks out. But overall, I was just talking to the water department this morning about how that's working on their end, and it was a very fruitful meeting. We hope to do a little bit of changes and hopefully resolve some of the questions they have. With that, I think the next successes I'm going to leave to my partner in the energy department.
As we talked about before, the Energy Department has undergone some reorg. The area in the resource planning group, you see the budget from 2012 went from 9 to 32. There were 12 positions from the strategic marketing group, which would be those under Sabrina Barber that were moved over under resource planning under Blend, and also the 11 positions from the SOC that were moved out from the marketing resulted in the increase. And then again, there were 3 more, 2 EITs from the trading analysts and 1 more that were added in, which makes up the 32. Under system ops, again, the 81 to 76, the 11 they moved out from the marketing over to resource planning, and then the 6 that they added back in account for the 5 differential there. And the transmission and distribution system planning, 1 position was transferred from energy operations, and that would be an assistant manager, which was Juan Carlos Sandoval. Energy Department successes. Under number 2, improved transmission distribution reliability via completion of multiple projects. Pardon? I'm sorry. What about it? Oh. Yeah, somebody needs to hit escape there. Okay. Number 2, the Energy Department actually improved the transmission system with the addition of the Coachella Valley substation transformer. As you were...
We're still talking on the other one.
Oh, who's doing that? Okay. As you were aware, we moved the 300 MVA transformer up to Coachella Valley. We had the 2 150 megawatt transformers that were there. We paralleled the 2 150 megawatt transformers and then stuck a 300 megawatt. And we actually doubled the capacity running through the transformers up there. That actually helped us out, and you've heard the Mr. Escalera talk about the 2 to 3 hour restoration during storms and earthquakes and stuff. We actually had a lot of energy during those storms and that were pushing that expanded capacity up. Had we not expanded that capacity, we would have had major outages through our system because it would have overloaded our system. And so by doing that, it played into that 2 to 3 hour restoration, minimizing the downtimes. On that September 25th outage where they actually lost the Swipple line out here, our system actually held up with the outage. And if you remember, that's the same line they dropped when we had the September 8th, 2011 outage. but our system with the changes that we've made has actually improved operations. We've changed our relay settings. We've taken the recommendation by WEC. We've improved our relay settings and moved from 115% to 150%, which has actually given us about 15 minutes of overload condition to be able to operate the system longer to mitigate the overloads that are on the system. It's really improved the process that we were.
Enough time, Carl?
It's for down here with the heats, that's about all we can expect to get. A coastal system might get 30 minutes with the same time, same settings, but with these extreme heats in the summer, it only buys us about 50 minutes, but that's enough. That gives us enough time to operate. The other thing that we've done is we've put in the Midway to Bannister line. You've had reports on that going in, that first 8.5 miles plus the Hudson Ranch 2.5 mile gem tide line. And then we're working on Path 42, which will increase the capacity going out of here for exporting of energy. The procured renewable energy resources needed to meet RPS average of 20%, 25% for the first compliance, second compliance period respectively. The IID has added, from Hudson Ranch we were taking 10 megawatts for 2013. We've added another 45 megawatts for 2012 from May to September during the summer months, and in 2013 from May to October, to give us a total of 55 megawatts of geothermal. The wood biomass, Greenleaf, up in Coachella, we've picked up 45 megawatts there. Sun Peak 1 up at Nyland, we were going to get 20. The output was actually 23 megawatts of solar. We have Soul Orchard that's scheduled for 2013. It's another 20 megawatt unit. And then Sun Peak 2, which is up by Sun Peak 1, which is another 20 megawatt unit scheduled to come on in 2014. So we've been successful in our resource planning group with Belen, getting these contracts negotiated. Some of these are short term. We'll still have to do something in the long term, but right now we're in compliance. We went live with the operational real-time 24-hour trading floor on in July. That's actually at 100%. It's up and running. You heard Belen give her 4-month report on that, so we've actually saved by implementing that about $1.6 million so far for the 4 months that it's been operating. Achieved execution of 3 affected system agreements, which provide long-term funding for retired upgrades to IID system, and streamline the study process to ensure II is delivering study reports in a timely manner. One of the things we're doing, we've got those 3 agreements in place, and those are capped agreements. We're in the process of actually finalizing the affected system study, which includes 11 different generators out there that will play into that. And that should be coming out next week, and then we'll be looking at more agreements to go in place.
Carl, I have a question. I know that this one is an updated one because you made some changes, but on page 12 of this one, number 5, and then you have one on page 13. On number 3, it talks about procured renewable resources, and it ends with insulate customers against rate shock. You don't have that on this new one, so you don't plan to do that?
Well, I think the insulation of customers against rate shock is the procedure for taking that $100 million in ECA and bringing $25 million out. As green energy rises, that's brought out and actually credited back to them on the ECA, which would prevent rate shock for 3 to 4 years, depending on the draw.
You plan to do that? You don't plan to give it back to our customers?
Well, that's a board decision. I think our plan was to bring $25 million a year out.
Okay. Well, I just thought because you have it on one and you don't have it on the other one. It's
He left the
wondered,
room.
you had-
Benson left the room.
No, I was just my own information because go on.
Number 8, we've successfully registered all operating entities, power generating resources under the Air Resources Board emissions program that allow IID to buy and sell carbon credits. If you remember correctly, the first trial auction was in November.
14th.
Yeah, and the IID didn't participate in that, but what we did was monitor that to view how that auction went. And at the same time we were monitoring it, our resource group under Belen is working on a strategy for how do we operate in that cap and trade market. And the initial auction didn't go as well as expected. I believe their pricing was $10 around.
The next one that just came out with today, the floor is going to be 1075.
Yeah. So they're expecting more. They didn't get as much as they thought, but this is a new process. That commodities market will vary depending on the participation and the supply and demand. As far as Energy Department challenges, one of the challenges that we have from a transmission strategic side of it are all of the regulatory issues that are coming out right now with the RPS and with the AB 32, the greenhouse gas issues. Those are driving the strategy for how IID operates. With reliability compliance issues, this board is infinitely aware of how important those compliance issues are. Those regulations are changing constantly, so we're having to constantly keep up with the changing regulations and then change our operation to meet the new regulations and the thresholds that they're establishing. The other thing that's coming out, and it's called FERC Order 1000. FERC Order 1000 is going to go back to kind of supplement the late 1990 deregulation open access laws, where they open access to transmission. And what they're trying to do is to get more private dollars into the building of transmission.
Coming for some time.
It's been coming for a long time. The strategies that we put in place are really, can we stay ahead of that transmission curve, especially with all of these transmission providers who can get a large rate of return if they put something in Cal ISO. If we're not careful and we don't have the right strategy, that will run over the top of us. So the strategies that we're putting in place will be to stay ahead of that curve. And it goes back to our risk position. We've generally had a zero risk position from a strategic standpoint on transmission, and we may have to look at how we change that risk position so that we can stay out in front of that and be the person that is providing the transmission that's required for our system. But that goes into number 2, develop a transmission expansion strategy that accommodates local growth in the new renewable energy sector with the least cost impact on ratepayers. Again, that goes back to what strategy are we going to develop? Is it all going to be IID rate base where we have the developers put those funds up front and then we credit it back to them so there's a zero risk strategy? Well, what we're finding out is how well has that worked? Right now, we've had one successful PPA on our system. We finally got the second one after how many years? While there's multiple developers that are off our system. So what we're looking at here probably needs to coincide with we want something that actually works, something that keeps us ahead of the transmission, something that promotes the growth in the valley, at the same time protects our BA so that there's no negative impacts to our ratepayers. And it might be something, and I spoke of this a little bit, it might be a hybrid system that protects our BA but has something for the expansion of renewable energy. And so we're looking at that. It's conceptual. We're just looking at that strategy. How do we move this company forward? We can no longer stick our head in the sand and say, we're here. We're going to be impacted. We have got to have a strategy to be able to handle the impacts that are coming down the tube. So we're looking at it from all those different angles. And then procure renewable resources, meet the third RPS requirement. That's the 33% by 2020, and insulate customers against the rate shock. There's no question renewable energy is more expensive. And that renewable energy will drive our ECA costs. I believe we've actually put a component on the ECA bill that's actually identifying what that portion is, so at least our customers can see these are regulated costs that we can't do anything about. What we can do is manage how we procure that and try to bring those costs down in that negotiation process as low and to be as manageable as we can, and that's something that we're striving for. And then mitigate environmental issues with San Juan Generating Station. As the board knows, the EPA, working with the Sierra Club, has filed lawsuits on San Juan because of the emissions that are coming out of the plant. There are negotiations going on, and since those are negotiations, I don't say a lot about it. But P&M has been making some decisions because they're the majority owner there. Those decisions and how they impact IID is something that we are working on, and we're working on a strategy on what we do with San Juan and how we deal with this mitigation of these lawsuits. And that's a substantial portion for us. What do we have? 100, Belinda, what do we have? 102, 104 megawatt? 103 megawatts there. So the strategy that we put in place and what we do, if we stay there, if we move and divest ourselves of that, then what we do and how we reinvest that will just come out of the resource strategy. Comply with FERC-NERC recommendations resulting from September 8th, 2011. This is a real event. It's a regional issue, but the recommendations coming out of September 8th, like our relay settings that I talked about, the operational procedures, alarms that weren't in place are now in place so that an operator seeing an overload condition is actually alarmed and he's notified of that. So there's a lot of mitigation that goes into this. Regional cooperation, viewing the region, working with the reliability coordinator to a greater extent. All of those things have been identified as problems, and we're in the process of working on those. That investigation by FERC-NERC is still ongoing, so we'll know more somewhere down the road on that. But it'll be a challenge, not only from an operational standpoint, but it takes a lot of resources to work on that event. And then address further incursion by regulatory agencies in IID service territory. Ensure that IID's comprehensive strategy protects ratepayers. Again, that goes back to the transmission strategy and how we handle that. We've looked at it from a PPTO or a policy-driven partial PTO to be able to get out in front of that expansion system, to be able to control that with ownership on the expansion through our system.
An oxymoron.
Well, there are a lot of people that would.
You know what I like about you? You're the eternal optimist.
Well, I really think if we do this right, I really think that the controls that we've put in place, the strategy we've put in place is starting to work. I think you're seeing that the developers are working with us. I think you're seeing that the other agencies are backing up a little bit. But if we miss a step, you can expect they'll be back. So what we can't do is miss a step. We have to push the policies that we've set in place and see those through to fruition, and then think past that existing scope so that we can control the next steps also. And that's what we're trying to do from a strategic standpoint. And then support the advancement of regional economy while retaining local control. again, economic development down here has got to be something that we actually support. I've heard a lot of people say, well, the economic development is a cost and can we afford that? We absolutely have to. The
But
economic
Carl, the IID is one of the biggest supporters of economic development.
well, but the IID.
We just need to tell our story because we are.
I agree with that. I absolutely think there's a huge advantage to us. The types of load from businesses coming in are the types of loads that we want on our system. The more loads that we have with higher power factors, the better off all of our customers are. So we can expand that. You do that through economic development. We have got to go back and put customer back in customer service when we're dealing with businesses coming in and promote economic development. But we have to do it in such a way that we don't break the bank. But it has to
Carl,
be
you
real.
don't understand. We are promoting economic development.
Well, I know.
We
but
are. Maybe we're not telling our story like we should, but we are.
I don't think we can get off the economic development. I think we have to push further because that really is to expand our existing base is really where we're really going to push forward in the future.
I think you covered it well, Carl. Thank you.
Marion, are there any questions from La Quinta?
No, none in La Quinta.
Okay, well, we're going to move on to the water department. I don't think that's going to be televised in La Quinta.
No, that's fine. No, that's fine.
Okay.
Go on. I
On
mean,
to,
if those three have to stay there, or they can just shut the place down. And that's up to the GM. What he
well,
wants.
I think they're done and they can leave.
Okay, is that correct, Kevin? Okay. Okay, you guys go home. Sleep tight.
Thank you.
2013 water budget, operating expenses, excuse me, have them broken down into 4 categories. O&M and other O&M, as you can see, those 2 line items have gone up a little compared from 2013 to 2012, but it's pretty minimal. Special O&M, which main driver is the water transfer, that's going up considerably, mainly fallowing and the water overrun payback. And the debt service has dropped considerably, 95%. We paid off all our long-term debt except the pension bond, which is an O&M expense. And so what you're seeing for 2013 is just lease payments that we have a few left for 13 and 14. Capital budget, the replacement line item is pretty consistent from last year, not much of an increase. The water transfer, when you compare budget to budget, there's a 7% increase. There's a much larger increase from what was actually projected to be spent this year compared to 13. Most of those projects just were delayed into 2013. And the other projects does show an increase. There are a couple of Imperial Irrigation Dam projects that are driving that. And centralized services is also very consistent with last year's and the projection. Revenue, there's no rate increase planned for the water department. The ag rate will projected to remain at $20 an acre foot. Retail sales, when we compare 13 to 12, are down a little because we're projecting less sales, although it'll be what we're projecting for 2012. There will be a much larger drop because we're over budget this year on our sales. Other operating revenue is pretty flat from year to year, and then revenue from other sources, which does include the water transfer, is up considerably. There is another price increase next year. It goes to $540 an acre foot, and there's also an increase in the amount of acre feet transferred from 90 to 100,000. But overall, the revenue is up 10% when we compare 2013 to 2012. So the total department, if you look at revenue including interest, is 162 million, almost 163 million. Less expenses including debt service, 142 million. So the cash available for capital is a little over 20 million, almost 21 million dollars. Now the next few slides, we've broken those numbers down or summarized those numbers into what we call the transfer, the Western Farmlands, and the water delivery system. And for the transfer, it's 59 million revenue from the Water Authority. Total water transfer revenues almost $72 million. The expenses, 56, almost 57 million. The two I like to highlight is the fallowing program, which is 24 million. There's some catch up there from when we weren't fallowing because of the litigation. And so it's additional acreage, and we're paying a higher price than we have in not so much last year, but in prior years before that. And then we have our first overrun payback budgeted of about almost 5.5 million. So the net that the transfer we're projecting to generate is $20 million. And this is all before capital. Western Farmlands, the debt was paid off.
I got a question for
Yes.
you on the sheet they gave us on roughly 30 employees that are involved in the transfer. Is that part of this administration program management cost, or is it another cost?
It will be in there, yes.
Okay, you got a few more pages or what? It's included in that 3 million?
Yes, it would be included in that 3 million.
So what are these 30 employees here, what do they come to total roughly?
That I don't know. Most of them are not full-time to the transfer. They will work on the transfer at various times during the year, and then we'll charge.
Yeah, some of them work quarter, 3 quarters, 1/3.
Yeah, but the majority of them are full. The majority of them are full-time.
Yeah, those would be under, I think, environmental mitigation.
The Sand Heralds that are full-time, that's under the old MWD program, MWD-1, right?
Yes, if you look at that, I was going to talk about it when
Okay,
I came
that's
in and
fine.
talk.
Go
but-
ahead. Okay, I'll be quiet. Go ahead.
Okay.
Greg, sorry about that.
Western Farmlands, this debt was paid off this year too. The revenue, 2.5 million. Expenditures, roughly half that. So net revenues of about $1.2 million. And it's the water delivery system. Retail sales, about $52 million. Other operating income is 17. That does include water availability charge and the falling water charge. And then MWD is about 12.5 million. Interest income, a little less than about 900,000. Total revenue, 83.5 million. Expenses a little higher than that, but almost a push. O&M, 71 million. The Met pretty much offsets the revenue. It's a pass-through, and debt service, a little less than 500,000. Total expenditures, 84 million, 59,000, which is 537,000 greater than the revenue. And then the adjustment we make, adding back 25% of the water transfer revenue, is from action the board took last year to use 25% of the transfer revenue to support the water delivery system. But if you added up the negative 537,000, the 1,244,000, and the 20,037,000, you would get the 20,744,000. So that's how they all tie in. And that, like I said before, is before capital. And I'll get to that slide in a minute. But the water department revenue, we've broken it down into 5 main categories. You can see the transfer is by far the largest, then retail sales. Metropolitan Water District's about 8%, falling water charge 5%, and other income 10%. Similar type chart for expenses. O&M, the lion's share, 51%, or about $72 million of the total. The transfer, 32%. The overrun payback, about 4%. Metropolitan Water District, 9%, and other expenses at 4%. And with that, I'll let Jesse speak.
Good evening, board members. Jesse Silva, manager of the Water Department. Just want to summarize real quick. I think I talked about it the last time, that the net increase in Water Department staffing for 2013 is 8, and that's due to the water conservation efforts that we're doing next year. Last session, I was asked by Director Hanks to get a list of people that are working on the QSA and other water conservation projects. In front of you, you should have it's a one sheet on both sides, listing of employees. And Director Menville is correct. The ones that show full time charge, those are basically people that are charging administratively to the program. What it doesn't, and then we also have a total of about 38 employees. 16 of those are charging to Metropolitan Water District and 22 to the QSA. That's the rough breakdown. Now, what we don't show on here is, for instance, this September, October, and a portion of November, we had one construction crew doing some work for the program. They are not shown on here. So any of those type of employees are not shown here, but we can start giving you a quarterly report beginning next year that will show those type of employees that are charging to the program as well. So if you have any other questions on that, I can change the format or do something else, let me know.
But these 33 people were part of the $3 million that's in the budget.
Yes, that's, in other words, there's I would say 98% of them are administrative personnel, yes. And again, on our water department successes, nothing has changed from the last time. We are proud of what we did last year, or this year, excuse me. And the challenges, again, I think it's going to be overrun of our 3.1 million acre foot cap, and how do we pay it back? And we are starting on farm water conservation. We need to get that going and work out the kinks. We'll also need to work on development of long-term or supplemental water supplies for future water demands. And of course, the system conservation plan, we're kind of redoing that, so that's going through some changes as well. And we need to look at funding for long-term capital infrastructure needs, especially like Imperial Dam.
Yeah, that's been one of my concerns, that we have a water delivery system that is old and it's falling apart. And we need to find the funds to maintain that. Also, any word on the work that we did for the storm damage by FEMA, and any word on reimbursement from the state or the feds?
No, nothing on that
Nothing.
yet, no. But
Yeah,
fortunately, if you look
more
at our
than likely,
budget,
you're probably not even going to get that money, right?
no, I doubt it. But if you look at our budget, even though we,
Something we had to do anyway.
well, in other words,
Well, most of
by
it.
using a lot of our people for a lot of that, it would have been working anyway. So even though we did a lot of work, it doesn't show up too badly on our budget overall.
And that's one of the questions, if I can go back for the staffing and the water department under construction resources. You going down from 139 to 137?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
How is that going to impact your operations?
Well, let me back up a little bit. I was going to tell you also that I think I told you the last time that as we finalize our planning for the capital work that we have to do on the system conservation, we may come back middle of next year and talk about adding some people for construction and maintenance if we find that that's the best course of action.
Because
to take.
that department, or that, you want to call it that, it's not a department in itself, but
Section,
that section is really, when you compare it to 10 years ago, the staffing has really gone down.
The
And they're
staffing
they're
and
probably
the,
doing more work now than they were doing 10 years ago with less
The-
people.
the people and the equipment is also deteriorated until, so we're evaluating all of that and trying to build that back up, but we weren't ready to add additional people until we know for sure how we want to do it. One of the things that we've done is try to utilize our equipment better. I'm getting reports. For instance, what we did is instead of having all the operators show up in Imperial and then from there get assigned to different places, we're now sending them to the North End, to Imperial, to Western Division.
Like we
to-
were in the beginning, before they made those changes.
Well, no, the equipment operators never did that, but now we're doing it, and it cuts down on the driving time, which increases the machine time, which then cuts down our need for extra equipment. So, and then we're trying to implement anything that increases our utilization of equipment, which then should decrease the number of equipment that we need. Once we get all those changes, made, then if we still need equipment, then we'll come back to you.
Jesse, the investment we made in that dredger that we bought from Mississippi, is that piece of
The-
equipment being utilized? Is it paying for
the big
itself?
crane, yes, it's
The crane, or call it?
It's a drag line, basically. It's being used, we use it on the East High Line to drag out the High Line, which I think made a big difference. We're going to put it back in there again because we're catching the silt at the head of the canal. Hopefully it doesn't go downstream and have us do work at the downstream end. We're also using it at the river right now to dredge the river. It's about the only thing that we can use. So yeah, it's a good piece of equipment, yeah. If we put it in the right spots, we can't use it everywhere, but
It's
there are
huge.
places.
You
Yeah.
can't-
Well, that's what we need in some of those big canals, yeah. But I think it will make a difference for us. And of course, we have drinking water compliance. You heard, who was it, Jeff, talk about the fact that he's got some neighbors that don't pay their bills and they're connected to the
Could turn the
system.
water off.
We're going to turn his water off and see if he'll give us the names. Anyway, any questions? Any questions?
What are you moving forward in the future? I know working with the WCAB on farm, because I know there's going to be they're talking about electrical and things like that for pump backs, and what's the thinking on that?
Well, for right now, what we're doing is we send out those forms asking for people's thoughts on what they could do for water conservation on farm. We're going to follow up. We're following up with them on calling them directly and asking them what they want to do, what can they do, and those kind of things. So that's what we'll do next. We still have the contract to come back to you. Hopefully, it'll come back to you by the end of the year, so that we can actually start signing people up for next year to do short-term conservation projects. But like you say, there's still a lot of long-term issues. What are we going to do with people that want energy, electrical energy for pump backs or other things? And the cost may be prohibitive, so I'm not sure. We're still kind of working through that.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions?
I've got one question for you and one on energy. On the upfront money that San Diego,
The 50 million?
on the Fifth Amendment, how much do we have left there?
Hopefully most of it.
I think it's all 50 million.
About 46.5 million is left.
Okay. Does it show as revenue in here, or is that off balance sheet, or?
It does show 5 million of revenue. When the clawback goes away, we bring that in as revenue.
Okay. And what is our off balance sheet on SCAPA now?
I will have to get you that number. You're talking about the total debt that's off?
No, we had some money.
That reserve account.
Reserve.
Yeah.
Oh, the reserve, it's 27, well, it's going to be about $31 million.
Okay, thank you.
Is that it on those, Dr. Hanks? Yeah. On the water? Okay, that's it on the water.
That's on water. I just have a couple of slides on centralized services, but before I get into those, I think I mentioned last time, we're still making changes to the budget. And so when we finalize those, we will highlight them for the board of the changes we made. Centralized services, we made some changes this past week. I think we dropped the numbers I'm about to show you by $92,000. So I think our goal is to get all this done and ready to go by the 18th. We're still waiting on a few departments to give us some revised numbers. We want to incorporate those, and then we'll put it in the budget package. As I mentioned last week, one of our goals during the budget process was to reduce centralized services by 5%, and we were able to achieve that goal. If you look down at the bottom line, you'll see the $3,029,000 decrease represents the 5% cut. Not all the individual departments were able to meet that, but we worked at it as a team and reached our overall goal of reducing it by 5%. And then one last slide that shows total staffing. Excuse me. Currently, there's 1,370 employees. We have budgeted 1,401. That's a very small number for vacancies. In prior years, I think it's been much higher. Might have been as high as 100 or 200 people. But that's what we have proposed in staffing, a little less than a 1% increase compared to 12. And that's the end of the presentation, if there are any more questions.
Any questions? Norma, do you have any questions? Okay. Okay, anybody out in the audience? I know you're the staff, so anybody else have any questions? Okay, if not, that's the end of the meeting. Thank you. Gloria, what we meet here at Friday at 12 noon?